It's time to level up your learning experience.
Time to level up.
Welcome to the Level Up Learning Show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Level Up Learning Show. My name is Jarod Borman. I'm an instructional designer for AEA Learning Online, and this episode's co-host is Craig Moore. Craig Moore back with me today, and not only that, as you can see, look, we're getting on our coaching mindset here a little bit with our coaching shirts. Talk to me about your shirt. Like, where did you coach? What's your coaching experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So this shirt is actually from a school district I taught at in Colorado. It was my last high school coaching job as a football coach, and it was a real fun time. I enjoyed it. Offensive line, and I've also coached boys and girls tennis and wrestling. So those are the three sports that I've coached. And I liked all of them for different reasons, but the last one that I had was, or the last official coaching job I had was a football coach.
Okay, I didn't know you coached tennis.
Yep. That was
my
first job. First job in West Burlington. I was a tennis coach.
Okay, and did you play tennis growing up, or is this like you're just kind of thrown into it?
Yeah, I didn't play like in high school or anything. My two older brothers played, so I was like familiar and I had played the sport. But they needed a coach. I was a new teacher, didn't have a lot going on, and it was one of those like, yeah, I'll give that a go. I can help them out. And
that's how they get you. That's how they get you. New teacher, we can throw him in wherever we need to because he's desperate for cash.
We've all been victim to this.
Totally. Totally. That's exactly how they try to get you into the school districts where it's like, they have the teaching position, but then, hey, could he also maybe fill some of these other coaching positions that we're trying to fill in as well, kind of get our most bang for our buck here.
So
I get it.
So true.
I get it. And I also coach. Go ahead.
I just said, what have you coached?
Well, see, I've got my wrestling shirt on here because I coached youth wrestling. I've actually coached high school level, middle school level, and now for like the last 11 years or so, I've been coaching at the youth level for wrestling and youth baseball, softball, only because my kids, were at that level and everything. But I didn't know you coached wrestling as well. Were you a big grappler?
I wrestled in high school. I enjoyed it. And again, it was kind of one of those, they needed some help with some wrestling, and I was happy to get back in the wrestling room. At that point, I'd only been out of the wrestling room for 4 years. So it was very familiar to get back into it and just kind of, assistant coach with them. And with the offensive line, I was kind of focused on the heavier guys. And at that point, 22, I'd still get back in and wrestle with them. At this point, I probably struggle a little bit more than I did back then.
I hear you there. I am the same. But that's the key thing, you always hear, like, when I'm watching college football, I like watching college football. And when you listen to college football, whenever they talk about the offensive lineman, they always equate to, this offensive lineman was also a state place winner in wrestling. Like, you always hear wrestling being involved in that particular offensive line position, so just the mechanics of it and the movement and all of that and the physics of it seems like it's very similar to one another. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's just about really getting moving. It's, when you're in wrestling, you're learning about the specifics of movement, and that helps in football just as much.
Yeah. So people listening and watching may be wondering, like, why the heck are they talking about coaching so much and sports and everything when we've been on this, our first 6 episodes have been all about, the classroom setting. We've done the business sector. You were with me on that particular episode when we looked at what businesses are doing in terms of learning. But learning itself, when we talk about leveling it up, coaching and sports is also another form of learning. And not only that, we as AEA Learning Online, we're thinking about the potential of, are there some coaching courses that we want to begin offering and so forth. So it's all hand in hand. All learning is across the spectrum and the board, but really this episode, we're focused on the sports aspect, but I'm sure anyone who's not a coach could easily replace the word coach with teacher or admin, and athlete with student. And you're going to hear some very clear connections between not just practices, but classrooms as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jarod, one thing I would add to that is a teacher is really a coach of content. And on the flip side, a coach is really a teacher of a sport. So by being a coach and by being a teacher, you can the transferable skills there's so many of them. And learning to shoot a basketball and learning why redshift is a thing when we're looking at faraway galaxies are two completely different things, but it's that process of learning. And Trevor gets into this, but it's that idea that we're all learners, and embracing that learning and facilitating the learning is really where that sweet spot is.
Yeah. And we're going to do our show and tell first, but before we get to it, quick, I want to ask you a question. I remember, all kinds of different movies, sports movies, where they kind of focus on the main character of the athlete, or there's also some movies where I can, for me, I know one in particular where when you watch the movie, that coach was just inspirational in that movie, and you're like, I want to be like that coach, So what is your favorite movie that had the most inspirational coach for you?
Yeah. It's such a tough question because, like you said, like when you watch the movie, you're not watching it for the coach. You're watching it for like the athlete. And that's the big event. When I reflect back on this question, I think for me, the scene in my mind that is the most influential is in Rudy, when he tells Rudy to go in. And it's just like that. The coach is really like not a major part of that. At least in my memory, the coach isn't a major part of that. But it's just that decision of like how emotional it is and the outcome. And then at the end, the celebration. I think that Rudy has to take the cake for me.
Okay. Actually, there's two
What's
that
yours?
pop into mind for me. That was, man, I remember when I was in high school, Any Given Sunday came out, and Al Pacino giving that locker room speech. Literally, I remember we would just play that speech before football games. No music. It was just that speech blaring on the speakers in the locker room. And you're just like, claw with your fingernails for that inch. And you're just like, yeah. You just get the goosebumps and it just goes.
I love
Otherwise, I got to say, man, Denzel Washington in Remember the Titans. Holy cow. I think that's a coaching role that made a huge impression on a generation of kids that were, in sports during that time. And I just remember, some of those spiels that he would give, and you just get the goosebumps going, and just the way that he, no matter what, was trying to create this atmosphere of family, or this atmosphere of we are a team and a brotherhood.
Yep. I'm glad you said that one, because that one, it was between the two for me. Originally, I was going to say Remember the Titans is my one, but then like deep in my mind, it must have been earlier on, somewhere deeper, there was this thing about Rudy.
Oh, yeah. Yep. No, either way is good. But for the show and tell, it's not from a coaching perspective. I would say there's kind of there's an unsung role within sports that may not get a lot of attention until they mess up. Once they mess up, then it's all over media. And I'm talking about the sports broadcaster, the announcer.
Ooh.
And the announcer and I do the football announcing for our home games here where I live. And I've done that for, I think, 12, 13 years now. And this announcer takes a different angle. He's announcing. His name was it Dan or Dave? I think it was Dan Hasty, and he's announcing for a minor league baseball game. But he thought, you know what? Let's take a different angle with this, since the Masters was going on at the same time, and he decided to do some play calling for a baseball game as if he's announcing at the Masters. And we know that those very calm. Golf
Can't wait to
clapping,
see it. I can't wait to see
very
this.
calm. So let's hear how Dan Hasty calls this baseball game as if he is in fact calling the action at the Masters.
Hello, friends. A beautiful Saturday afternoon in Comstock Park. This is inning number 7. Still in the front 9, if you will. Eric Pinales hails from San Cristobal. It's about 30 kilometers from Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. Right now looking at a pitch from about 60 feet, 6 inches. No idea how that one stayed out.
I struggled a lot in 2022 with his control.
A fine hit, deep to left center. Off the wall. Lucas Dunn into second base. Exquisite. A 1-out double here in the 7th.
An excellent approach to that hit. Patient, able to line it up, deposit it into left center field.
Got it into the short grass out there. Aren't you happy that doesn't sound like that every single day?
You're putting me to sleep. Felt like a lullaby.
So you actually, this actually went pretty viral not that long ago, very recent video. And I think you asked me about it and brought it up one time, and I hadn't seen it yet, and so I watched it, and I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. I don't watch a lot of golf because of that style of announcing where it's quiet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the announcer's not right at the action, right? Like they're not on the sidelines where they have to be quiet too, right?
Correct. They do have like the play-by-play up in the booth, but then they do have the on-field or on-course announce. You know, they got that real tall antenna that they wear. But I'm the same way. The announcing style is a little bit different. It's very calm. But my favorite, 60 feet, 6 inches away.
Which is the distance of the mound to the plate, you know, just like a lot of comparisons that were just absolutely comical. Can you imagine if they called golf the same way that they called soccer? You know, like, oh! I just think that would be very comical.
Yep.
Well, anyway, we need to get to our lesson of the day, and this is going to be a two-parter. I've already decided because when we sat down with Trevor Ragan, we got into so many good topics, and I got to tell you, I've known Trevor since like 2000, I want to say 16, 17, somewhere in there. And when I met him then, his brand was called Train Ugly. And the whole concept was behind it, the idea was the fact that, you know, when you're learning something for the first time and when you're training, it is going to be ugly. Like to go into any kind of practice facility or anything like that, your practices are not going to be perfect. And I know they say practice makes perfect, but in his message, based on the studies that he was reading and the research that he was reading, it was like, no, and it goes completely against everything that, you know, we typically think about when it comes to sports. And so from there, I got to tell you, he isn't just a guy that stays on a message and then that's his message and then that's what he talks to people about. I mean, this guy's worked with Olympic teams. He's worked with professional sports teams. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies.
Yep.
The guy's done a lot of work with a lot of different people. So what he's got really reaches a broad group of people and really all of us because we're all learners. But because he himself is a continuous learner, which is what we preach in education as adults. We need to be continuous learners.
Yep.
Trevor practices what he preaches. And because he's a continuous learner, he has, in fact, evolved his message and his content and his branding to now where he's called the Learner Lab. And that whole idea of being in a lab, experimenting. Let's experiment with the idea of learning and understand how we can, as what we preach on this show, take things to another level. How can we level it up? And boy, does he got some good topics in there. So let's take a listen to this first part of our interview with Trevor. And then when we're done with that, we'll come back and do a reflection.
It's time to level up.
So that was our first experience with Trevor. And so I guess just from there, we've gotten to know him better and better. And now that he's back in Iowa and the educators of Iowa, and I think for this particular episode, we really wanted to take sort of a coaching angle. And I know that you have worked with elite teams all over the country, probably internationally. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. When it comes to what this show is all about, taking things to another level. And those kind of teams, and we hear that with even coaches here in Iowa when we try to put together learning opportunities for them as a AEA Learning Online team, is like, how can I be able to do that? Because a lot of the learning that they have to do online is like concussions, ethics, things like that. But really, they want to know, how can I develop my athletes better and get better as a coach? So I know that there's all kinds of areas, but I would probably say the first question I'll pose to you is if there was one particular area based on your experience in working with top tier teams, what is an area when it comes to coaching or practices or athletic performance where if you had to give advice to a coach, you may want to start putting more time into this or focusing on this? What would that be?
So that answer for probably the last 7 years is different than the one that I'll give now. And I've kind of been changing a lot of like how I think about that. And where I'm at now, like the big goal and where I think we should spend most of our time as coaches is the answer to helping my players get better and helping our teams get better is not going to be adding more on their plate and more time. And this is kind of an aha moment I had 2 weeks ago. I was at spring training with the Phillies, and like, obviously these are major league players, and the conversations we were having with them is like, yo, we practice like 5 hours a day. And is the answer to making us better to practice 6 hours a day? It's like, is it as simple as that? And the answer is no. It's like, we're all kind of like at our ceiling for how much time we have. And that goes for people at the major league level, but that goes for you and I, that goes for like anyone. It's like, oh, if a coach is listening to this, it's like, the key to making your players better isn't to make your practice 3 hours long instead of 2 hours long. And so where I am going now, and what I'm thinking about the most is, what can we do in the 2 hours to make it way better rather than just adding another hour? And I think there's all sorts of different angles you can take it. You can talk about like the different mindsets of the players. You can talk about the way we arrange a drill. You can talk about the things we do before and after practice that can increase the quality. But like where I'm at and where I'm trying to spend most of my time like learning is, okay, 2 people could go to the same practice. 2 people could go to the same lecture. 2 people could experience the exact same thing, but get much different things from that situation. And the key difference is kind of like how we're approaching it, what we're focused on getting out of it. That's, to me, how you increase the quality of our practices and extract more value from the experiences that people are already going through. And one thing that I've kind of stumbled onto literally in the last 10 days. So you kind of caught me at a good time of I'm in podcast mode, which is I'm trying to make the 4th season of my podcast, which means I'm interviewing all sorts of researchers, really doing like deep dives into a lot of topics. And one that I can't stop thinking about seems so obvious, but it's the importance of reflection in learning. And so I interviewed this awesome researcher. Her name is Giada Di Stefano. She's Italian, and her research is on like reflection and why it matters. And so I interviewed her maybe just like 4 days ago, and I've just been reading paper after paper. And a lot of her work is showing, I guess the best way to do it, let me explain like 2 of her experiments, and it might be a place to kick off this convo. So it's like this really simple task, and they give people, I think, like 5 minutes to practice the task. And at the end of 5 minutes, they go, okay, you've had 5 minutes of practicing this task. And in 2 minutes, we're going to test you. And the people who are the best at this get paid. So they created some stakes, like getting good at this thing matters. We're going to pay you if you're good at it. And so they go, but for the next 2 minutes, you have a choice. You can choose to practice the task for 2 more minutes, or you could choose to like reflect on the practice that you already did. What would you choose?
You're asking us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, should I go with the answer that I'm you want me to give?
No, so it's like I'm with you that Trevor for my whole life would be like practice reps,
Yeah,
let's
totally.
go. Like
Yeah.
give me that. And 82% of the people chose that, which makes total sense. The reflection group crushes the practice group. And so it's like, okay, what's going on? That's their pilot study. So then she does a bigger one, and they find this huge organization. I think it's sort of like a call center where they make the people go through like a 6-week training program, like really, really intense training program. And all they did is for the control group, they go through the normal 6-week program. And for the intervention group, for the last 2 weeks of the 6-week program, they spend the last 10 minutes of every day reflecting on what they did throughout the day. What'd you learn? What went well? What could be better? Just basic stuff. And during that same 10 minutes that they're reflecting, the control group is still training and practicing. So they're getting more reps. And at the end of the 6 weeks, they have this huge assessment that they give out, that this organization gives. The reflection group scores 21% higher on the exam, on the assessment, than the additional practice group. And so, again, this is like so interesting to me. And in the interview, Giada just straight up said, she goes, at a certain point, spending a little bit of time reflecting is actually more valuable than acquiring more practice reps and experiences. Now she goes, this isn't replacing, like you can't just reflect. You need experiences to reflect on. And so the way I think about it is, what does this mean? And I just like got off the phone with my brother after I learned all this. He's a volleyball coach. And the way I see it is this: 95% of normal practice plus 5% of reflection is going to be a way better than 100% just normal practice. And what does reflection do? Basically, the way I think about it is it helps us extract more from the experience we had. It helps us take a second and go, okay, what went well? What didn't? What could be better? And then the other wild thing in the research is it doesn't have to be like a super detailed, long-winded reflection session. You don't have to like think about this for hours and hours and hours. It's like, no, just a few minutes, like with really broad questions like that. What did I learn? What am I doing? What went well? What didn't? Like is so important. And like what a small investment of time that can lead to like big changes. And so like that's been something I've been really excited about. And obviously there's bigger things than that. But what I like about that is a couple minutes really increases the value of my 2-hour practice session. Like that's that's a lot of bang for your buck. And I think that's like a nice, easy to do thing. And I'm trying to do it more as an individual. And that is something I'm trying to weave into our workshops now. Like I just did one for a software company this morning, and I was building in quick reflections like throughout the whole session, because it's just like, yeah, I think that's like easy to do and super valuable.
So I think like when you say the word reflection as a coach, I'm thinking about like right now I just got done with youth wrestling practices season not that long ago. Now we're in the midst of starting baseball season. And so, I got 16 fourth and fifth graders that I'm trying to keep corralled in some way. But when you say the word reflection, that as a coach kind of feels like, so I just have them sit around and answer these questions in their own head, or are there questions I should be asking that are better than other questions? Do we talk about it out loud? Like how would this is maybe just for me, but how would I structure that?
It's good. So a couple big things, and then we'll get into the weeds. So big kind of misconceptions. One is sometimes when we talk about reflection, especially in sports, it's like we kind of do it after a loss, or when things don't go well, we're like, that didn't work. We better think about this. And what Jada shows is like, of course, that's okay. But even reflecting when things go well is really, really important. So you don't just have to wait for something to go wrong to reflect. So doing it even after a win or after a good performance is great, because there's stuff to be learned there. So the old cliche of I either win or I learn, we can just like add a layer to that and just be like, yeah, you can win and learn, you can lose and learn, and reflection is a way to like help you do that. And then
I feel like I'm called out because that was literally on the back of our wrestling shirts like 2 years ago.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with it. Just add the little like carrot boy and just be like, and learn.
Make it a note right now.
So she did talk about some experiments where they compared sort of general questions with more specific ones. She compared having people just think about it to writing it down. And she found it can be general and you don't even need to write it down. And so if you're thinking about how to apply this, even with younger players, it's let's find time to do this a little bit more. You don't have to spend like 30 minutes on this, but after practice, having people just sit there and just be like, all right, for 30 seconds, don't share, but think about like, what are some things you learned today? Now share with someone you're sitting next to. Like literally that would be great. As you get better at it, you can think of this as a skill. As we're giving people reps and doing this more, they get better at it. And then it might be something that they can start doing in other domains. And that's another thing that they found is the intervention group that is taught to reflect, they start reflecting more in other situations. And now that's helping them outside of just this training program. So it's like there's some spillover effect. But yeah, you can keep it general. You can have people just kind of reflect. They don't necessarily even need to write stuff down, which is, I think, awesome.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about your different settings, different athletic settings. That's kind of tough sometimes. But Craig, if you got a question, I'll let you throw one out, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Trevor, as you're talking about this, I think back to, coaching prep programs, when I was in college going through, the theory classes and the different ways you kind of prep, get prepared to be a coach. And one thing that I continually go back to is the importance of breaking down complex tasks into very specific pieces. So in your example earlier where you were at spring training with the Phillies, thinking about like, from whether it's a 7-year-old, a 14-year-old, or a 35-year-old, not working on like the entire swing of hitting the ball, but you're working on something very specific, and that specific thing is what you're kind of focusing on. Do you see the reflection happening like after each individual piece, or do you see it like you work on a combination of individual pieces of a complex task at practice and you reflect at the end?
So I think doing it at the end is fine. You don't really want people, especially in a game, like in reflection mode when you're trying to like compete and perform. It's like, what went well? What didn't? It's like, I think saving it for the end is good. I think depending on how you've structured your practice, there can be some reflection time in like woven throughout, like during breaks and stuff. And I think that's good enough. It doesn't have to be like reflect after every swing you take. So it's like, it's not something that we have to go overboard with, but a few minutes at the end. And then when the time is right, like during a break or whatever, that would be a nice moment as well.
So you just talked about like, trying to build a quality practice. And I know that there are some major developmental things that we can do as coaches. I think I still struggle with this, and I've been coaching for, geez, I don't even know how many years now, like pretty close to like 15-ish years, maybe 20. And it's just like, how can I, that's a question I always keep in the forefront of my thinking, is how can I make practices the most effective in order to, for me, there's nothing more frustrating than as a coach where you're like, oh my gosh, we have worked on this and worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and it's not transferring over to performance during competition. So I guess, like, what could we do in practices where we can maybe get a higher percentage of those skills being transferred over?
Yeah. So we'll answer it in two parts. And I want to get to that last part because that's really important. So if I'm thinking about how to improve the quality of practice, obviously incorporating the reflection is good, but like, let's even do better. I think one is, none of this requires a total revamp of the stuff that we're doing, but a little bit of creativity and a little bit of thought into, can I increase the amount of reps for each player in the gym or on the field? And it's just like, if you just look at the traditional drills we do, and you look at a traditional practice, you see a lot of lines, and it's like just a part of it. But for almost any drill with a little creativity, and I'm most comfortable in like the basketball, volleyball world, but I've worked in like baseball and football and stuff. With a little creativity, you can start to shorten those lines by adding another ball or another hoop. And it's just, I think, really valuable because, one, that makes the practice more fun because people are more engaged, and you're just increasing the amount of reps, which I think is a good idea. So I would start maybe there of like, let's get rid of these lines. Let's get more reps happening and create more engagement by shrinking the teams, adding a ball, whatever it may be. Now we go to the transfer piece, which is, I think, it should be a North Star for almost any coach at any level, which is, you framed it perfectly. I want to see that the progress we made Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday shows up Friday. And usually it doesn't very much. And there's like a whole like field of research that studies this, and you could get really, really into the weeds. And I have for years. And where I'm at now is, again, we got to like keep this simple so people actually do it. So what I think about is, we want to practice the actual skill in the way we intend to use it. And that's not a very good like Trevor sentence. There's too many big words in that. But like, if you really, really break that down, that can be a nice guide for improving the quality of our practice. So let's start with practice the actual skill. So many times, and this isn't just in sports, this is in life, we practice something that doesn't even resemble the actual skill that we're pursuing. So like basketball is maybe an easy example. If you go on like TikTok or Instagram and look up basketball training programs, you see people like standing on a Bosa ball, blindfolded, dribbling a tennis ball, and holding like a pole in the other hand. And it's like, okay, if you like had an alien that doesn't know what the sport of basketball is, and you go like, what are they practicing? They're not going to guess basketball, because it's like, it doesn't even look like anything you do when we watch like the NBA playoffs tonight.
Sounds something more like Circus Soleil.
Exactly. Now, this is the trick though, is if you do that drill, you get better at the drill. And so we're like, look, they can dribble the tennis ball blindfolded holding the pole. But if you look into the science of skill development, you see you're not going to get much transfer. Like if you're good at standing on a Bosa ball, dribbling a tennis ball, that doesn't mean you're better at dribbling a basketball in traffic with people trying to steal it from you, which is the actual skill. And so when I say practice the actual skill, it's, what is the skill I'm pursuing? I want to be able to dribble a basketball in a random environment where people are trying to steal it from me. And that has nothing to do with being blindfolded dribbling a tennis ball. So that's the actual skill in the way I intend to use it. Now, for people listening, maybe we're all not like coaches or whatever. Like, I think about this a lot when I'm practicing for a talk or presentation. So most people, when we're preparing for a presentation or a talk, what do? We write it down, we have our notes, and then we usually practice like alone in front of a mirror a bunch of times. Cool. Is that the actual skill? No. Is that the way I intend to use the skill? No. How do I intend to use the skill? I need to do this live in front of an audience, and I'm probably not going to have my notes in front of me. So the skill of getting good at notes in front of the mirror, in a way, isn't even the same skill that I really, really need, which is no notes, live audience, one shot. And so, okay, how do I practice the skill in the way I intend to use it? It's rather than me alone in front of the mirror, it's after a while, get rid of the notes. After a while, give the presentation to people. Even if it's friends or family, as soon as there's another human in that room, it's going to create a totally kind of different environment for you to practice in. Another way to think about this is making practice a little bit more game-like. It's never going to be like a one-to-one match, and it doesn't need to be. But just going through the brainstorm of what variables will be present in the game, how can I incorporate a few more of those variables into practice? Because again, we want to practice the actual skill. Another example would be in baseball, even at the major league level, all the way down to little league. How do people warm up? Taking infield. How do most people as coaches do that? I have the fungo bat. I hit it to third. I hit it to short. I hit it to second, hit it to first, hit it to left, center, right. And I go through like 3 times. Okay. What would make that drill better without a total revamp? Any ideas? Without changing the amount of reps, without changing much, what would make the drill better?
Probably not going in a pattern order, but just varying where the ball goes, so they have to pay more attention.
Right. And what a small adjustment. As soon as, if I'm the coach, I don't tell them who I'm hitting it to, what happens? Well, one, every player is now locked in on the swing, which is more game-like. The old way is, if I'm the third base person and you hit it to me, I know that I'm not getting it hit to me for like 7 more times. So I can just chill. Like, I'm getting no value for the next 7 swings. But if it's randomized, I kind of have to be locked in, which is more game-like. I'm having to kind of read it off the bat, which is more game-like. And then you can still give every player 3 reps. So it's literally like the same drill, the same amount of warm-up, but the quality of that drill is much better because I'm introducing some of these variables that will be present during the actual game. And look, that's one example, but in any sport, in any drill, there's a similar like little tweak that could just make it better.
I like that.
That's awesome. That's so good.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm continually being called out once again. Like, I know that's what I do for our work.
No, you're good. It's like none of us really think about these things because it's like not many people it's not about understanding the science. It's like we don't really have access to it because the people studying this, it's like kind of like a bubble. Like it's hard to get into that world. It's hard to understand what the research is. And then it's even harder to figure out how to apply it. This is just something I've got to like see in action a lot, something I've been thinking about a lot. But again, I want to make clear for everyone listening, and this is a big change that I've made, where young Trevor would roll in to the team and basically be like, everything you're doing is dumb and it needs to be like this. And now, I really do believe it's like, it's not about a sweeping change in everything we do. It's like little adjustments to the stuff we're already doing can make it much better. That's what we're after. That's doable. And that's like less of an attack on people.
So that's just the first part. We don't even get to the second part. Man, there's just so many good nuggets involved in that. The one piece that I want to talk about, and it's so, it works so well with what it is that we're doing right now, you and I, and that is the reflection phase. And he talks about reflection and being used in practices. So I got here Just really simple 10 minutes where you're asking athletes to be able to pause, do some metacognition a little bit, which is another term that we've used a lot in education. But the idea of just being able to think about what was my practice like for me? How did I respond to certain aspects of practice, whether it was skills, whether it was other teammate interactions and so forth. But obviously I feel good. I mean, every single episode that we do with the Level Up Learning Show, we end it with a reflection. And it really is that opportunity for us to try to make those connections. So I, as a youth coach right now in baseball, I actually did that whole reflection thing, like literally that night for practice. And some of the kids were like, you just want us to sit here and think, and it wasn't necessarily just like that, but we did do just a very brief reflection, and then we shared it with one another. And it was really good. I think it's something that we can continue to practice overall. How about you? What was a connection that you made?
Yeah. I think for me, the big thing is like the quality of practice. The idea that we don't have to spend more time on things. We don't have to completely change what we're doing. We have to look at what are ways we can improve what we're currently doing. Like you said, introduce another ball. Or if you take this to the classroom, have more stations where there aren't people sitting around waiting to get that practice. They're there. Now's the time to do it. Now's the time to improve your game, your learning, whether that's on the field or whether that's in the classroom, and getting those reps high. It's one of those things like you don't really think about, the idle time of a practice or a classroom, but really changing that and making the experience and the time quality by small tweaks. And they don't have to be all at once, tweak one thing, tweak another thing, with the goal of getting those reps up and improving the quality. I think that was my big takeaway.
And the other thing too with that in particular was even in your warm-ups during, game day, you get in such a routine where some guys, they'll just start walking through it, they just kind of go on autopilot. Whereas if you can incorporate variety and unpredictability, even in your warm-ups or activities, that could have a much more significant increase in their preparation mentally, physically, everything. In fact, one of the activities that I did both of those things literally again that night in youth baseball. So I was like, okay, today I got to reduce the lines and I have to make sure that I put in there some kind of variety. So basically with our infielders, and we did outfield, infield, and we ended up switching. But with our infielders, we did the activity where they were in groups of 4. So now we're adding more, another baseball or 2, and 3 people are out there, like they're ready to field the ball. And then one person, usually it's me, but I'm like, does it really have to be just me? Could I have one of the kids do it? So the 4th person was rolling the ball like a grounder to the other 3, but he wasn't going to tell which person he was going to roll the ball to. So there's your unpredictability, right?
Absolutely.
So if you field it cleanly based on the technique that we talked about, and you get your body squared up and you throw cleanly, you get 1 point. First person to 5 points gets to switch places with the person rolling the ball. But if the ball goes right between your legs, now you go back to 0. So I know we didn't talk about that part necessarily, but I was like, it's a little bit of gamification here where it kind of adds that little bit of competitive feeling for the kids. And I could tell that the kids were like, I really want to keep this ball in front of me. Because I said, even if it goes in and out of your glove, as long as the ball stays in front of you, you get your point, right?
Absolutely.
So it worked out pretty well. And I think the kids really enjoyed it. And for me, there's always that time for practices when kids are showing up and all they want to do is just grab a ball and start playing around. And I'm like, that's fine. But, we are going to warm up as a team. So if you're just throwing you're going to be doing it twice. So now I could say, hey, if you show up early and you got a group of 4, go play this game in the infield or go play that game in the outfield. And so now they got something fun to do that is self-directed. So when it comes time for us to warm up, we can warm up as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think to myself, like as a coach and as a teacher, the more we do these things, the better we get at them and the better we can implement these things without the front end loading of like, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to plan it? You just do it on the fly. You know this from, there's a difference in a second-year coach and a 20-year coach. There's a difference in a second-year teacher and a 20-year teacher. It's that ability to be flexible. And, that's one of those things that we actually get into part 2 for this. So,
I can't wait to share part 2. It's going to be awesome. We get into some really big topics that really just kind of started to blow my mind a little bit. And it's like, man, this just makes so much sense. Why haven't I, as someone who's been coaching, for 15 or more years, like made these connections so far? But, that's what Trevor does. He takes research, he ingests it, he chews it up, and then he basically baby bird feeds it to you in simple ways where you're just like, yes, that makes sense. Right. So thank you, Trevor, for baby bird feeding us and our listeners and watchers. And, that way we can learn with him. So it's a lot of, what I like is he makes you feel invited on the learning journey with him. You know what I mean?
Yep. Absolutely.
So, hey, well, this was a great episode, Craig. Thanks again for joining me, man. I always love having you on. And, hopefully for part 2, you'll come back. We could have some more banter and reflection and all that good stuff, and get that episode out as well.
Yep. Thanks, man. I always appreciate being on. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Take it easy, man.
Yep. See ya.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Level Up Learning Show. If you want to check out all of the show notes and resources that were mentioned in this episode, you can do that by going to our website found down at the bottom, or feel free to interact, post questions, comments, your reactions to anything from this episode right on any of our social media feeds. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.